Well, hey everybody, welcome to another Wednesday. It is Wes McDonald and my best friend, Ken Edmonds. How are you, Ken?
I am fine, but your name says Marty McFly.
Yes, let me hide the banner here for a second. I was just having a little bit of fun today. And for anyone that's watching and knows Marty McFly, you get bonus points in the comments section if you let us know who Marty McFly is and why I would care. And Marty McFly is one of my favorite characters. Actually, I won't even tell you what it's from. Just if you are watching today in the comment section, make sure you let us know why I'm called Marty McFly today, which movie that came from. And
that's not all we want you to put in the comments.
Yeah, well, one second here. Questions and comments for sure as we go through this. And the other thing is, let us know where you're watching from. This is Ken's favorite part. And
yeah, because we're a global movement. We get people from all over the world. So we always like to know where you're watching from.
Greg Walters says he's a time traveler. So really?
Yeah.
And what we're doing here is kind of time travel because we're doing it live, but people are going to be watching this after the fact, Ken. So when we're doing live streams, we are time travelers because people will see us in the future. Is that a bit of a stretch? We'll find out. We've got a special guest coming in today to help us out with this episode. I'm going to bring in Mr. Matt Lee in a second here. And Matt Lee is someone that I've done some work with through some other groups that I belong to. Just an amazing guy. He does have his own series as well called Behind the Beard. And he's got a great charity right now, which I'll let him speak to when we bring him on, as well. So without further ado, you got a drum roll there, Ken? What's going on, Matt? Oh, I can't hear you though. Technology, eh? And let me go to our banners here. So remember, everybody, questions and comments. Join the conversation. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And of course, where are you watching from? And,
all right. What about now?
So you're not watching technically, Matt, but where are you coming in from?
I am. Where am I today? Oh, I'm in Wichita, Kansas, in my studio. Yeah.
Well, and I'm back home in Canada, so just across from Buffalo on the border. And Ken, you're not going to be broadcasting where you're from for much longer.
Nope, I'm in Asheboro, North Carolina, but I sold my house on Sunday, so coming soon I will be in a new location.
An undisclosed location heretofore, or
what?
An undisclosed location heretofore, or do you have a plan of where you're going?
I have a plan. I'm going to wind up in the Central Florida area.
Okay, all right.
It took him a little while to answer, though, so I think I think the undisclosed part might actually happen, right? And it's a really good segue into the topic that we're going to be covering today, right? Which is, kind of looking at, sort of identity-based authentication. And this is something that's just got my brain all on fire right now. And I'm really glad you came in, Matt, because this actually, the spark was lit during one of our top 100 sessions where you came in to speak to the group about security. And of course, the world is changing, right? And, the first thing I'll put up here is, well, first of all, why don't you explain to people what you think the definition of identity-based authentication is?
Well, I think that's maybe just a smidge misspoken. I would really just say everything's always been identity-based authentication.
Yeah.
What we're seeing, though, is centralizing that identity, right? And let me ask you a simple question, Kenneth. How many passwords and sites do you think you sign into on a regular basis with an email address and a password?
Oh, probably 100 or more.
Right, and each one of them are a different little tiny Kenneth. They are a different one. They could have different email addresses. They could have different, right? They could all be multi-Kenneths, right? These little individual. Yeah. And the problem is you're now reliant upon each of those sites and their own individual security posture to protect many Kenneth, right? So baby Kenneth has to be protected at every site, or else baby Kenneth gets his assets stolen, whether that be your bank account, whether that be your credit card, whether that be whatever it may be. So let's start with that premise first of just understanding that we right now live in a world of tons of mini Kenneths. What I'm talking about is bringing everything back to a central identity, one Kenneth, one place where the decision can be made of whether or not to let that Kenneth sign in. And here's what I mean. If, let's say, your bank account doesn't have two-factor, it only has maybe a text-based two-factor, not a better, more secure method, let's just say. And let's say your church doesn't have any particular password other than just a password to sign in, right? So if you look at those differences, protecting mini Kenneth is hard because they all have different protections available.
Right.
When you centralize an identity to a identity provider, an IDP, you're allowing that to say, okay, this is going to make the decision, and then I'll be able to sign into anything I want based on rules I set. You could even say, hey, listen, if I want to sign into my bank account, I got to be sitting at the 3rd train in Boston, and I got to be looking out at westward direction. Like, you could set better and better security parameters to allow you to access more sensitive things because you're doing it in one place. And so the world is shifting into a place where one central identity, and you've all seen it, and you're going to laugh when I tell you where you've seen it. Have you ever signed in to something by using the sign in with Facebook button?
Yeah, or Google, right?
Or Google or Microsoft. Those are taking and centralizing the consuming side, the service provider is what it's called in this relationship. This website, your church website, now is being signed into by your Microsoft account or by an Okta identity is what would be in the enterprise world, right? So what I'm trying to get at is single sign-on is the concept of bringing it back to one identity decision plane and not having that be distributed everywhere else. Now, I think to Greg's question is centralization versus decentralization is a fantastic question in the comments here, right? It is easier to break into one, yes. But in the same way that I know how to defend an 11-man front in American football, I'm sorry, guys, I'm just not that cultured. I'd love to take it fully Canadian. But if I know how to defend that 11-man front, I know where the battle's going to be. I know, right? Was it harder to defend against guerrilla warfare or lining up and shooting at each other as it used to be in history? It was, right? The delineations is the other piece. But my point, and maybe that's actually a bad analogy as I use it, but Greg, what I can do is with that one central place, I can now set harder and harder parameters. I did a 1-hour show last week with a guest that brought in multiple identity providers in the beginnings and actually now had several decision points that you had to meet all these parameters before you could ever even attack it. And it's the whole concept of zero trust relies upon that central identity. But great question. And I think it is a bit of one of those fallacies that I think exists in this world of saying that centralization creates more risk. I think if you treat it right, centralization creates a better plane to deal with the risk. But sorry, very tangential, but fantastic question. I always love it when I get good ones.
I love how you tied it back to this idea of centralizing that identity, right? Sort of making it the one. And excuse my noisy dog.
It's okay.
I'm all by myself today. My wife is actually off for a couple of days with my daughter, so I have the whole zoo here. But this idea of sort of centralizing to that one identity. And you know what? Like the first time that I did that with Google, when it came up, I was like, do I really want to share that? Like, do I really want to? I don't
know where my camera is, but yeah, Greg. Sorry.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Greg is an awesome guy. He's actually going to be, hopefully, I don't know if I got a response back yet, co-hosting with me next week.
Nice.
Ken's going to be gone. Very forward-thinking and one of the smartest people that I know. And yeah, I love, looking at that, how warfare has changed. What a great analogy to kind of make it real, right? So let me ask you this.
Well, Greg's analogy is better, actually. I screwed up because the guerrilla warfare is actually significantly harder to defend against, which would indicate that you'd have no single points of failure for shooting at each other. But anyways, it fell apart in my head, and then Greg gave me a good one, so I'm stealing it. But yeah, sorry.
Let me ask this then. So one of the things that's very frustrating is passwords, right? So
yeah,
is this kind of our way away from passwords, and is this really picking up steam? Like, how long are we going to have passwords for? Because did you mention before?
Great question. So let me teach a little bit here. It's kind of my gig, right? So when you're talking about two-factor, because someone mentioned it, or multi-factor, or passwords, they're all talking about this central concept you need to understand. Authentication, right? Identity, authentication, authorization, and then ultimately accountability or accounting. But if we take it into the authentication side, is that really Kenneth? Yes or no? When you're trying to do that, the way you do that is with 3 types. There's type 1, something Kenneth must know in order to get in. If you think back in the speakeasy days, you had to know to knock on this door and say, Tutti Frutti, and they let you down and you have an alcoholic beverage, right? At least in the United States. I keep making these colloquialisms that may or may not extend into Canada. I'm so sorry. I'm just not that good. But is that Kenneth or not? Type 1 is something he must know. A password, that's what we think of as passwords, is a type 1 authentication. A type 2 authentication is a something I have. And so a text message is presuming you have that phone. And I'll come back to that in a second, right? And then the third part is something I am. That would have been your secret spy, eye scanner, right? Or a palm vein scanner as we use them now because they're very effective. Fingerprints, those are things, something you are. Now, the challenge is as we start looking at these, passwords, easy to trick someone out of. Humans are stupid. We're pretty gullible, right? Like it's fairly easy. Type 2, something I have. Depending on the type of something you have, that could be more or less relative of being a valuable something you have. There's an underlying system in cell phone technology called Signaling System 7 or SS7, and it's something that all nations essentially have participation in to route global calls. And ultimately, and I'm over summarizing, but ultimately you can spoof text numbers. I can receive your same text messages, right? I can get your PIN that I need out of that text message, right? By having access to the cellular network, by cloning, by tricking someone at AT&T to make my phone the real phone. There's methods. And so the point is that that's the something you have. But if you look at that same something you have and make it something like this, my FIDO token that you must pry out of my cold dead hands. There's no side channel. There's one side channel attack method against it. There's no replicability. We can't crack the encryption nonce that comes out of it. It's non-reversible encryption. You're starting to get into a world where this is significantly more valuable as something I have. Now, here's the unique part about this. 2-factor just means having something from each category or multiple things in one category potentially, right? So when you start looking at something I now have a PIN to access this. I know that PIN, but if you trick me out of it, you can only use that PIN if you have this. It's only paired with this. It's not my password. So the education aspect breaks into why I had to do that first. Passwords as we understand them should go away, right? I think passwords as we understand them should shift into representations of us as a physical resource, representations of us in some way where the PIN pair comes out as a signed, and you don't have to understand all this, signed cryptographic nonce that proves that I have my private key to this generally known public availability key. And so ultimately what's happening is you're changing how we sign into a much more secure basis. And then if you centralize, then this identity extends into the other things, and it's the only way to access this. There are no other attack mechanisms. And if you add to that to say that I must have this, and my computer must be encrypted, and it must be running all my antivirus stuff that my security people want me to run, and it must be set up this way, and it must be, all those must-be's create barriers to entry for threat actors.
Sure.
And so are they going to go that way? Yeah, and it's going to be simple. It's going to be as simple as the first time you click sign in with Facebook.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And that is, when I think about that, just the manageability, because I know that, many people that I know, once they do get hacked, all of that information, all their passwords and everything else, which they think are safe, really aren't, right? Like once they, kind of start getting into that.
I've got a buddy of mine that just, there's a ransomware, or there's a malware out there called Redline malware, or I think it's Redline. And it just steals Chrome saved passwords. So all these people saving a password in Chrome thinking, hey, I've saved my life. I've got my saved Chrome password. This is great. I'm now using it as my password manager in some way, or heaven forbid, they're just storing them as it asks, right? Those just get dumped, and he posts them on LinkedIn every day, redacted to some extent, but he doxes people where you call someone out essentially, right? Sorry for using slang, but he does that every day. It's part of his day-to-day way to fight this war from a cybersecurity perspective is by publicly putting it out there when people continuously fail. And so I think the point is that we as a society have to either do a few things, West. We have to grow in our understanding of tech. Kenneth has to understand the cybersecurity risk to himself person and to his business person, right? That's a first statement I think is a truism that has to exist as a pillar. I think the other piece, though, is the vendors, the Microsofts, the Googles, the Apples, and you're seeing it right now, have to make it easier for people to do the right thing and harder to do the wrong. Why do they let you make a shitty password? Pardon my French, right? Those conversations, and I'm not blaming that on the French. I know there's a French Canadian constituency that may hate me for that statement.
Half French right here.
Okay, sorry, West. But the point is that I think we have to make it to where the only way you can sign in is by more secure methods, and the only way these vendors create stuff is by clearing up their technical debt and making it easier for when Kenneth wants to make one Kenneth and sign in with something secure. Any person can do it. They're guided down the right path. And I think that's some of the things we have to make over the next 5 to 10 years as an investment.
Yeah, I agree. And I know that, part of the reticence that I've seen from a business perspective in the world, people are trying to help people's security is this idea that education is still so important, right? That it's, hold on a minute, like you're telling me I got to keep re-educating my people so they don't click on this or click on that or, share their password. And it's like, well, yeah. And I just wonder if once we start going down this road, that the education piece, I mean, education is important, but the easier it is to take a piece of education and actually
apply it
in your life, right. But, whereas something like one of the things I heard on passwords before, which I actually thought was very interesting, and it was, forget using passwords, use passphrases, right? So I've got kind of like, I'll put 3 or 4 words together that I know, and then I'll replace certain characters in the alphabet with characters, right? So that I've got a mix of numbers and stuff. But my passwords are exceedingly long now, but I remember them.
And that's part of the problem too.
Right?
So that's part of the problem. You shouldn't remember them.
Right.
You should remember one. And I think that's what I'm advocating for is even if you had a password manager, let's say you're using LastPass or I don't want to be exclusive. There's tons of different options out there, right? NordPass, just because they're on my line card, so I have to mention them. Anyway, sorry. Shameless plug. Yeah, thank you. But take those single password managers, make a long passphrase with your character replacement that means something to you that you won't ever forget, and then have some two-factor method, whether it be a YubiKey or a cell phone, whatever it may be. A lot of us cybersecurity guys, I'll go on a tangent real quick, but a lot of us cybersecurity guys get kind of uppity about the best type. Like, this is much better than cell phone. Phyllis Lee put me in my place. I don't know if you know Phyllis Lee. She's the senior director of controls at a place called Center for Internet Security. She creates a lot of the best practices for people to follow, the CIS V8. But she got on to me and she said, Matt, something is better than nothing. Right. Don't talk them out of doing something. Fair. Touche.
That's very true, right?
Right. So, but
factor is so important.
Yeah. So off that tangent, back to the initial point of saying, oh, I lost it actually before. I get on my dang tangents and I forgot. Can you help me out, West? I was starting down a path. It was good.
Let me see there. Oh, for the passphrases with the characters
so you sign into a password manager with a long passphrase and some kind of two-factors, text or whatever it may be, and then you use giant random passwords, ones that make you so angry when you have to look at your password manager and type it in on your Apple TV like you want to throw up. That kind of length, right? Like that's what it has to be. And then you'll never remember them, right? A 72 character or 20 character or 30 character password, is really tough.
I think he has dog home problems today.
This is what I'm living with today, gents.
Yeah, and Greg hits a good point. I'll get to that here in a sec. But if you then use this as your transition method and you start changing, and I'll tell this story. My wife hates it, but she's not downstairs, so it's okay. But you get your password manager and you sign into it, and you start replacing all your passwords with randomly generated stuff using the password manager that you'll never remember. That works on your iPhone, that works on your Google device, that works on your home computer, and you're now able to make it so that your random external mini Kenneths, all the ones that still exist that aren't changed over to this magical new world, right? All of those aren't something you remember, West, and so that's your in-between. And so you don't use that passphrase over and over and have to remember iterances of it, because once I crack that, I'm going to use it everywhere, right? And so, but to Greg's question, he says, so we're returning to a blockchain physical key, which I like or prefer. Yeah, I don't want to mismention them. Maybe I'll tag in the comments later the companies, but there's several companies doing really interesting work around these immutable identities. Microsoft just bought a platform version of that. You're starting to get into some of these things where you actually could theoretically be a blockchained model. Most of the stuff we're talking about is probably not, like Azure Active Directory, Okta, those aren't blockchained at this point. They do have some encryption type stuff because of using FIDO2 protocol. And you did see Apple, Microsoft, and all these players. And I know we're going to tie this back to business, West. I'm being too techie here, but you know,
not at all, brother.
all of these players are agreeing to use FIDO2. And FIDO2 is this is a YubiKey 5C. So it's still cryptographic, but it's public-private key pair, not provable blockchain iterants, if that makes sense.
Well, and one of the things I love, obviously, is that you do give people some things to do some homework on. And for people that are watching this, obviously, live, I hope you're taking notes. And if you haven't, you can watch the recording and learn about some of these things, right? Because the more we know about this, the better, the more secure we can be in the world. Because let's face it, Matt, one of the things that, you know, that's happening in the world is everything's becoming cloud-based, right? Everything has a service, or, you know, so this kind of stuff is going to be so important for people because it's changing, right? How we do business is changing. And that's one of the things that really sort of popped my brain when you talked about bringing it back to business, right? Is that if we are moving into this world where we're centralizing kind of identity control, and our offerings are all, you know, sort of being done that way. And I did bring this up in the top 100, is that the offerings, the way that we get things to customers, I think, have to be based on that identity, right? So it's like, hey, you know, who's this person? That's what they're going to pay every month, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're going to charge for that. And you'll notice the name of our program is actually Flat Rate World, because we've been big proponents of helping people in the managed print services space to do this. And one of the things, I mean, Ken and I help dealers both with flat rate on a per device basis and also on a per user basis.
Yeah.
My preference has always been per user. And as I've started seeing more of this stuff move into the cloud of all the services, I like to call it unified billing, right?
Yeah.
If I was a customer, I don't want to bill with 6 different ways to pay. It's like, oh, here's your lease payment. It's going to cost you. Here's your per user payment for these services.
Yeah.
And here's your per device monthly payment for these. So when I'm looking at a bill, I've got 16 different items. I just want to know, it's like, no, how much for that person for all those things, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the road that I see this going down. That's why it gets me, you know, really fired up, is looking at what's happening in the rest of the world outside of our channel too, right?
Yeah.
So this is really exciting, important stuff that I would say, quite honestly, we don't think enough about or talk enough about, right?
Yeah.
We just don't.
If we hadn't let Kenneth get a word in edgewise, and I've made tons of little Kenneths out here. So.
Well, I was going to say the one thing that where I see this becoming hugely important is because I don't think this distributed workforce is ever going back to being completely centralized. I think those days are gone.
Yeah, negative.
Yeah. If you look at a good example is if you look at surveys, what you find is that especially with the younger generations, the ability to work remotely is hugely valuable. And so I could see this being a very useful application, because now we can secure the VPN to, you know, their corporate, you know, with this single point identity. We can track their usage. And there's just so many ways that this will, I think, have application going forward in that in distributed workplace.
And even that is a broken thought process. And here's what I mean. I think you're 100% right in the very beginnings of that, of this non-centralization space and all that. But if you take the vision of cloud that West started down of, this one thing, and I'll ask it the way I always start. If you close your eyes and dream, and you start a company tomorrow, thank you, West, for playing along. Is there any chance at all you buy a server?
Not a chance. No.
Not a single chance. Is there any chance you even virtualize a server somewhere? No. So if you take that single premise of saying there's no reason to, because I'm going to start up with an identity provider, whether that's Microsoft, whether that's Okta, it's not going to be Facebook. It's never going to be Facebook, right? That's for personal use. But we're going to start up with an identity provider that we can make some good decisions about that identity, and we're going to start to partner with software as a service vendors, people that have made a site that I just sign into and use, and I pay them X dollars per what? What do I pay them X dollars per, West? What do I pay them X dollars per?
Well,
per human.
Per
person. Per identity. My point is there. So if you imagine that world, if you just take that as a central starting point for this conversation, right? You understand that if I'm going to start a business, I'm going to have one identity. I'm just going to use web stuff. I don't need to VPN back to an office, because there is no concept of an office from a infrastructural perspective. The only reason people infrastructurally get back into an office was to access the crappy apps that are still running that make your business worse than the guy down the street that starts up right now. And I think when we bring it back to a business point, those new businesses will be more flexible. They'll be faster to iterate. They'll be faster to fail. And they'll be able to do it in a way that's more securable, as we just discussed, with that central identity and central single sign-on to all those applications. And the ability to have more security and protections against ransomware methodologies, because the data doesn't live there. The identity now becomes the central argument plane. And so to take it all the way back to the beginning, West, if you are not realizing the world's shifting to an identity-centric world and not an infrastructural-centric world, then you're broken. And I think that's my point, is that it's about where is the centrism of where the business goes. If I take that further, because I want to make a business case, I had this really interesting conversation. We had an intern. She actually was an intern in marketing. She had her master's, I believe, in marketing. She was brilliant. And she was 26 or something, let's say. I can't remember. And she comes up and she says, hey, I had this really bad experience in another internship I had last year. Oh, tell me about it. Well, I had this VPN thing, and I had a V drive that I had to store my stuff in. And as we continue to converse, it dawned on me that since middle school, she had been in Google Works and Google Drive and in Google Sheets. And then since college, she'd been in Microsoft and Microsoft SharePoint and Microsoft Teams. And wait a minute, she had never touched a server, which means if you're going to go attract that talent that's coming out of school, that's coming out of internships, that's coming out of these growth spaces, they're going to feel like trash going back to your crappy system that's running in a closet or in a damn, Azure VM that's hard to access. And I don't mean to punch on Azure. I love you too. But the point is that those are legacy Band-Aids for crappy companies. And I don't mean to punch companies in the face that haven't made a realization that their new competitors starting up tomorrow are going to be faster, more flexible, attract the talent, have better abilities to iterate. They can add a new service in seconds. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. In the old days, you wanted to start up a new ERP server, and I'm going to make it simple. Let's just say a new widget service. You would buy a server, or you'd already virtualize a little different one. You'd order an OS. You'd plan with your MSP to plan the project. You'd create the server. Hopefully, you'd do all your security things. And then in about 3 weeks to 6 weeks, depending on your MSP schedule and time and what you're doing, or your internal person, you're now going to say, all right, cool, let's test this out. And you pay for the license, you put it on the trial, and then it sucks. And you've wasted 2 months, almost an entire quarter, testing out a shitty product. Yeah. And my point is, you could do that by going, Microsoft, give me one license of this, click. Oh, I don't like this. Done. That's 1 day.
Right.
So when I say faster and more flexible, I genuinely mean they'll be able to fail faster in their iterations because of the ability to be fast and flexible on a central identity. And then when they're even testing it, it is secure because it's secure the way you structure the identity as you first enter it. So I get passionate. You know me, I get on board.
I do too.
But,
and I'm equally passionate with you on this because part of the problem in our channel is, and I love the channel I work in, right, is that we're trying to marry some of these new ideas into the old ways that we do things. So saying, well, I kind of like this idea of subscription revenue, but because I'm still infrastructure based on my business model or device based, I'm going to tie it to the device.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've always said when I've been training people on this is that when I'm looking at a device, right, I can only ask so many questions, like from a business perspective, right? How many pages a minute does it do? Is it color or black and white? What's the service schedule on the maintenance kit?
Yeah.
But when I lift my head up and look at the person, then I can ask a whole bunch of things that I can make more money on, right? Like, what keeps you up at night, right? What is your primary objective in this business? Those kind of things. So
you can even have different types of users, right? Like if you were trying to go to I'm not a copier person and print, I don't understand it. So just call me stupid here, but you could have power users that print X number of pages and do this average. So if your challenge is trying to find what's the median cost of this device, toner, paper, all of those things, and you're doing it by device or by pages or whatever you're trying to do, you could probably summate that in a large enough data set to say, this is what a power user should cost. This is and we'll make ways to determine if you're a power user or not. And we'll build.
And appreciate that. Actually, Ken and I have built calculators around that whole thing.
Oh, cool.
To help dealers to
Pardon
do that.
my ignorance on this one. You guys get to teach me. I get to teach you. It works.
Believe me, the reason we have you on to talk about sort of the security thing, we're so glad you came on, was because of that. Ignorance is bliss, they say, but we bring in an expert, and it's really that's living, right? So
a student. I'm an expert student.
Yes, I love it. What did I say earlier? An enthusiast, or
there you go. On LinkedIn, yeah.
Aficionado, but
I'll take aficionado. That's
I like that one, right?
Yeah.
I think it's pretty good. Okay, we'll start tagging that one anytime we work together again. But yeah, for everyone out watching out there, I did, just to be respectful of our time here, we got a minute left. I did put up your link on LinkedIn just so people can find you.
Yeah, please connect.
Yeah, and Matt's like literally one of the best. I've learned so much from him, and hopefully you have
Thanks.
today as well. And remember, I'd be remiss to let people know we were just talking about doing calculations for how to bill on a flat rate model by user. We are also going to go through compensation, how you actually change how you compensate your sales reps for that. So it's very simple. Go to flatrate.world/compensation and get signed up. We're going to be hosting this in September.
Okay, now, so everybody sign up, but it's not just for salespeople. We are going to talk about compensating the service team and other employees in the company. It's not all about the sales.
It shouldn't be. Hey, and Matt, I cannot thank you enough. And one other quick shout out, because Ken, you talked about remote work. I've got an upcoming episode on Tiger Tube and Tiger Paw Radio called Extreme Remote Work, and it's with Ian Richardson and Carrie Richardson on their van life, right? So we had a great interview last week.
I want to add one more thing.
Yeah.
For anyone watching this, my website is cybermattlee.com. And on that site, there's a Shave That Beard site. We are shaving our beards, me and 15 other people, one of them being a former CISO of the White House in the United States, are shaving our beards for charities. We have 5 charities picked out. We're going to try to raise $100,000. We're at $25,101. And then we will shave our beards at IT Nation Connect, which is an MSP channel event in November. We will have a celebrity barber coming in. We're going to dye our beards. It's going to be fun. And we're going to do it out in a booth in the middle of potentially Connect at that conference. So please donate. I can use any help you can give, $10, $20, $50. I wouldn't mind $10,000 towards these fine charities. But please check that out at cybermattlee.com and then go to Shave That Beard. It's a link in there. So,
and I love the work that you're doing on that. And I think Ian did mention last week when we did a post that you're part of the way there. But, people get down there. I put it in the banner there, cybermattlee.com, and do your part. It's easy to do. And Matt's one of the best people I know, and it's always good to support great causes. So
thank
awesome.
you.
Well, listen to all of everyone that's joined us today. I can't thank you enough. And until next week, keep learning.
See you, everybody.